government has given a strong signal of its intention to proceed with the disposal of the 51% stake in SAA. Now, in addition to Finance Minister Marcelle Gordon's budget allocation of 1 billion rand to settle the airline's historical debt, National Treasury is also not ruling out further funding. But this would come with strict conditions that would allow for the completion of the airline's acquisition by Takatso Aviation. Now, SAA has welcomed the allocation, saying it will be directed at offsetting the balance of their debts, which the airline says have come down from 3.5 billion rand to 2.5 billion rand. Joining me now is Thulasizwe Simelane, the Takatso Aviation spokesperson. He joins us virtually from here in Joburg. Thulas, thanks for your time as always. Now, SAA is saying it welcomes that appropriation of 1 billion rand. Is it of any significance in the progress of that strategic equity partnership agreement?
Quite significant, Marcelle. It is a step in the right direction, and it takes us a step closer to the completion of the transaction and taking the transaction over the line. Remember, the context of this all is that both parties to this agreement, this 51% strategic equity partnership agreement, have a checklist of tasks and functions that we each have to carry out that will have the effect of completing this transaction. So government making good and fulfilling its obligations that it entered into in terms of the business rescue process in April 2021, that the 1 billion rand allocation from the budget yesterday takes us one step closer to government completely ticking off that particular obligation, which on the overall scheme takes us a step closer to the completion of the transaction. You'll remember that while the business rescue processes and the obligations to offset the debts of SAA, which initially stood at about 13.5 billion rand, and they've now come down, as we hear from the SAA statement, they've now come down to about 2.58 billion rand. Those obligations predate the entry of Takatso Aviation into the picture, which only comes in June of 2021. But it is significant nonetheless, and that's why we welcome it heartily, and we want to dismiss the notion that we are somehow underwhelmed by it all. We can't be underwhelmed, because it does come with that undertaking by National Treasury that further funding for this will be considered, but with the strict condition, which is in the budget report, that it will come with strict conditions that will allow for this transaction to be finalized. So we simply can't be underwhelmed by it. We welcome it.
Now, 1 billion rand is a lot of money to you and I, but we do know that that debt and the issues at SAA run pretty deep. You say you're not underwhelmed, but is there a little bit of disappointment that that allocation was on the whole 2.5 billion rand? Does that impact how you approach the plans that you have for this acquisition?
No, not at all. There's no disappointment. In fact, we were quite clear in our phrasing of our statement. We wanted to shy away from emotive language. So there's no disappointment, there's no underwhelmed. It is very matter of fact that it's not what we had expected. But we are engaging with government. The engagements are ongoing. And Marcelle, I should know this because I do sit in these meetings where we go through every second week of checking how far have we gone with the checklist of, where's that task? Where's the task to take the process before the Competition Commission, which, Takatso Aviation partly is responsible for, in terms of us then reporting back and saying, what has the Competition Commission been asking us, and have we responded? How far are we with the financing task team? And that is given an update, and government will also give their update in terms of these processes. So disappointment, underwhelmed were words that never crossed our minds because we are engaging with government, and we do see a pathway. Because if you look at where we've come from 13.5 billion rand that government had a responsibility for, and now we're talking about, as SAA tells us today, 2.58 billion rand, partly due to the improved financial position of SAA, and what the airline says in the statement is the innovation of its management team. We are now at this point of 2.58 billion rand. You put that 1 billion rand into that, there are pathways to the whole amount being settled.
What have you and your team read into what you've seen as being positive news coming out of the national carrier? You speak there of the innovation they speak of, better news in terms of their bottom line. This can obviously only be encouraging for an organization looking to come on board sooner rather than later.
Oh, absolutely. It basically vindicates the position that we hold of believing that SAA can be an African airline, a Pan-African airline that proudly carries the South African flag, but doesn't begin and end there, but actually adds value to South Africa Inc. It basically is run in a sustainable, commercially viable way, and that it can be run in an agile manner that is able to respond to the changing dynamics of the market as and when they happen. Let me give you an example, Marcel. The work that the management team at SAA has done, reopening a number of routes, and I think a few weeks ago they were reopening the route to Malawi. That is great and fantastic. But the moment right now actually is ripe for the airline to expand and grow even further. Given what the aviation situation is, with predictions, industry predictions, credible industry predictions, talking about the airline industry in Africa. Africa to Africa is expected to grow some 6%. Africa, Middle East, also 5.8 thereabouts. Africa, Europe, also in for that range of growth. So there's a big moment and opportunity. If you have an airline like SAA with the extensive route network that it had and the infrastructure that it had, the potential is massive. And when that is realized and capitalized as we intend to do with 3 billion rand, we would be able to then take full advantage of this opportunity. But we must stress, Marcel, that the window of opportunity won't always be there. Competitors are moving in the various areas, and therefore that's why we are anxious that we should cross the line with this transaction so that we can be in a position to implement the business plan that we already have for SAA.
Can you give us an update on what that window and timeline looks like for your organization with competitors breathing down your neck now?
Well, I can't give you the sense of the timeline of how long this window of opportunity will remain open. But certainly the aviation industry is right now in for, and I'm not an economist, but I dare say that there's likely to be a kind of a boom of sorts. Look at what Air India has done, purchasing 470 aircraft, which is considered to be the biggest aircraft purchase in the history of aviation. That's in India. But if you look around, for instance, Boeing, and the figures I was citing for you earlier on come from Boeing, and they are public figures, and I can mention them. They come from Boeing, and they indicate the possibility of these increases that I'm talking about. You look across the Southern African region, just recently, Zimbabwe was inviting, airlines, including SAA, to ply more routes between South Africa and Zimbabwe. You have the situation where the management team at SAA right now has been looking to expand. So the routes such as Victoria Falls, Namibia, you look at what they did recently with Malawi, certainly the potential is there. You capitalize this airline, it can reclaim much of that space that it used to occupy. And part of what we've structured in this deal is that as and when dividends are realized, government will have a preferred share. So when we implement this business plan, we expand, the preferred share of government will be 3 billion rand, and dividends will be paid to government even before other shareholders, including Takatso itself. And that can only be good for South Africa Inc.
Indeed. Thulasizwe Simelane is the spokesperson for Takatso Aviation, joining us virtually from Joburg. Thanks for that update, Thulasizwe, and I'm sure we'll continue to keep tabs on that developing story.